Pandemic restrictions have long since been lifted, and people are back outside. Socializing is transforming in a completely new way, and there are plenty of growing pains coming with that. To understand how to get through these growing pains, I sat down with a psychology professor and a psychology student to get their perspectives.
My name is Liz Daly. I am a psychology student at Harry S. Truman.
Hi, how you doing, doctor?
Good, how are you?
Pretty good. This first question I got for you, how did your social life change during the pandemic?
You know, I grew up in a smaller town, and when the pandemic happened, I was a senior in high school. So, it was like we went off for spring break, and then after that, we weren't really sure when we were going to come back from that. And there was a lot of talk of like, oh yeah, we're just going to extend spring break a little bit. And then that turned to, we're actually not coming back to school at all.
In the before times, most of our social interactions occurred in some combination of face-to-face, as well as, whatever we were doing virtually over social media, things like that. When the lockdown occurred, that restricted the day-to-day face-to-face things that we did, and in many ways made us more heavily rely upon the virtual connections.
Classes were online only. There was no going into school, seeing your teachers. It was harder to reach faculty from the school, definitely. And I think you also just started to lack motivation. Everything was just very sudden, lonely, isolating, and I know I'm not the only one that feels that way. There's probably millions of other people who went through that same experience during 2020.
Sure.
There are a lot of studies that are now being published based upon that particular time, and the data are really complex, really conflicting, and so I don't think we as researchers have really fully fleshed out what that is, but the things that I seem to be seeing from the published research is that by and large, at least the initial year or so, right, lockdown forward, although there were definitely increases in feelings of loneliness and feelings of social disconnection and exclusion, they were relatively small. And what seemed to happen was rather quickly, if people had the ability, right, they had the privilege to have social communications virtually, right, they had access to smartphones, those types of things, they were able to connect with others in that way. Was it perfect? No, but it was what we had at that time, and people really leaned into it. There are some data that suggests that for some individuals, perhaps folks who didn't have those opportunities, didn't have access to social media in the same way, maybe they were members of vulnerable groups, for example, older adults, perhaps adults who were living in assisted living, folks who were in the hospital for other reasons, persons who were incarcerated, all these other groups where they were already vulnerable to feeling disconnected from society and didn't have those same options, they probably experienced exclusion much more poignantly than others. Okay. And again, some of this is speculation. The data are still continuing to emerge.
I'm more of a person who thrives off of in-person interaction. I don't really get tone or how things are going through text, because you can interpret things so many ways.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I feel like I definitely was isolating myself from those that I knew best, and also increased anxiety, increased depression. I definitely felt like things were never going to be okay. Because of all that uncertainty. We don't really know where anything was going at the time, and nobody had the answers. So I feel like socially, especially being told, stay inside, don't go out, it was really discouraging in terms of connection with other people.
I'm in the same boat, dude. Like, I also thrive off of like in-person interaction, being around a lot of people, and like you said, when everything is shifted online and everything is just through a screen, it's kind of hard to interpret the tone and the subtext behind a lot of those things. And what I'm really wondering is how do you recover from that?
What I would just say is do what they feel most comfortable with.
Mhm.
If someone is really anxious about getting into face-to-face social spaces, forcing themselves before they're ready is probably not going to be helpful because it's just going to heap on anxiety. So social media interactions, virtual connections, even traditional phone calls certainly help us stay connected, and maybe for some folks that's where they want to be. um, and if they are able to satisfy their need for belonging in that way and still live their life beyond that in a way that works, so right, we still have to make money,
Yeah,
right? I
absolutely.
mean,
Both.
we going to the doctor. I mean, there are some basic things that we need to do, and as long as people can still maintain those, if that's their threshold, and then everything else is virtual, if they feel satisfied in that regard, wonderful, right? If they are starting to feel like it's not enough, then they should probably rethink what would be some areas they would be comfortable in
Mhm.
venturing out, right? And actually that may be something where they probably, not as probably, they should definitely reach out to a mental health expert, a therapist, and work with those folks to figure out a plan that will help them refocus their lives in these after times in a
Mhm.
way that is best for them.
It seems like, from what I've read about it and the different studies that they're doing, they're looking into how it impacts brain function being isolated. And it's like, as human beings, it's in our nature to be social. It gives us dopamine, it gives us a feeling of purpose in life when we have others to interact with. And when you take that element out of it, I mean, your brain function can change completely. Dopamine levels in the pandemic were definitely decreased a lot because we're at home, you're staring at your same four walls, you have nowhere to go, nothing to do. And so you start looking for those dopamine hits, whether it be through food or watching TV or whatever it is. I feel like before the pandemic, you could get those dopamine hits from going out with friends, catching dinner, or going to the club, or whatever it was. And when you're at home all alone by yourself as well, without any interaction, it really does take an impact on your social skills.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's why I feel like people are having a hard time coming back from it, because it does rewire your brain. If you don't use those social skills every single day, it is going to impact the way that your brain functions.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think people should go about sort of rewiring that rewiring?
I think just making it more important to get out and do things. They talk about with kids how it's really important when they're young to get them out, take them to the zoo, take them to the park, make sure they see lots of things. It's kind of like going back to the basics,
Yeah.
but it's really important because the more you interact socially, the better you're going to be at it, but also, it's going to help repair those connections you might have lost when you were isolated.
Mm-hmm. If you're looking to adjust to the new normal of socializing, going back to the basics is a good way to start. Hopefully, this conversation can help you along the rest of the way too. Thanks for watching.